Welcome to True Echo, where every story reminds us that the truth has a heartbeat, and sometimes that beat echoes louder than the lies meant to silence it. Today's powerful story will leave you breathless, angry, and inspired all at once. Stay with us until the end, you won't want to miss a single moment. The first hint of trouble was so small that anyone else might have missed it. On a bright, golden autumn afternoon in Hawthorne Falls, a town so neat it looked plucked out of a postcard, 13-year-old Eva Carter clipped Rex's service harness onto his back and tugged her hoodie close against the brisk breeze. The German shepherd wagged his tail enthusiastically, his dark brown eyes full of loyalty and excitement. Their after-school walks had become sacred since Eva's mother died 2 years ago. Rex wasn't just her companion. He was her therapy dog, her protector, the only being who truly understood the ache she carried. She smiled faintly as she adjusted the leash. "Ready, buddy?" she whispered. Rex gave a soft, eager bark. The quiet of Hawthorne Falls was broken only by the hum of a distant lawnmower and the muted laughter of kids playing in far-off yards. Eva had walked this same path dozens of times, her sneakers tapping a soft rhythm on the sidewalk. She rounded a bend by the old hawthorn bushes, their leaves turning brilliant shades of red, and paused when she noticed a police cruiser idling awkwardly by the curb. Something about it set her nerves buzzing. Her father, Stephen Carter, a newly retired Delta Force commander, had taught her to listen to instincts honed by survival. She clutched Rex's leash tighter. He sensed her tension immediately, moving closer to her side, his head raised in alertness. 2 officers stepped out. Their body language was wrong, stiff, wary, aggressive. Officer Bradley Myers had one hand hovering near his belt, his other adjusting his sunglasses even though the sun was low and forgiving. His partner, Officer Conrad Lacefield, gave Eva a once-over, his lip curling slightly at the sight of Rex's service dog harness. "Afternoon," Myers said, his voice cold despite the warmth of the day. Eva nodded politely, heart hammering against her ribs. "Hi. You live around here?" Lacefield asked, glancing at the neat row of houses behind her. "Yes, sir," Eva answered quickly. "Just around the corner." Myers squinted at Rex's harness. "Service dog, huh? Big animal for a little girl like you." Eva steadied her voice. "He's trained. He helps me with anxiety. He's certified." But she could feel it, the way Myers' fingers twitched near his sidearm. The way Lacefield subtly positioned himself to cut off her retreat. "We've had calls," Myers said, voice growing sharper. "Reports of suspicious individuals. Kids. Big dogs. You carrying ID, sweetheart?" Eva blinked. "I'm 13. I don't have ID." The tension snapped tighter, an invisible thread pulled too far. Rex, sensing her fear, stepped protectively in front of her, not growling, not barking, just standing between her and the officers. And then everything happened too fast. "Back the dog up." Myers barked. "He's okay," Eva cried, stepping backward, tugging Rex's leash. But Myers' hand jerked to his gun. "No!" Eva screamed. The shot cracked the air apart. Rex yelped and collapsed, blood blooming through his thick fur. Eva dropped to her knees, screaming so loudly the entire street seemed to fall silent in horror. She clutched at Rex, sobbing, trying to stem the impossible tide of blood. Across the street, unseen by the officers, Eva's elderly neighbor Kim Delgado was filming everything on her phone, her hands trembling with fury. Myers stood over them, gun still half raised, face twisted in stubborn defensiveness. Lacefield muttered a curse and tried to usher Eva away. "You saw it," Myers growled. The dog was aggressive. But Eva wasn't listening. She cradled Rex's limp head in her lap, rocking back and forth, the world tilting around her. His eyes, so full of trust, so full of life, faded into glassy stillness. "You'll pay for this," Eva whispered hoarsely, her hands slick with Rex's blood. "My dad's coming back. You'll see." Myers scoffed, masking the flicker of fear in his eyes. Kim Delgado's phone kept recording. The cold steel bench inside the police station was not built for comfort, especially not for a grieving child soaked in her dog's blood. Eva sat there, knees drawn up to her chest, shivering uncontrollably. The interrogation room was lit by a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed loudly in the silence. Her sweatshirt, once navy blue with a proud NASA logo, was now stiff with dried blood. The officers who had dragged her there spoke in hushed, urgent voices outside the door, but none dared to meet her gaze. She wasn't supposed to be here, she knew that much. She was a minor. She had no guardian present. Yet here she sat because they didn't know what else to do with the aftermath of the horror they had created. A soft commotion at the front desk broke the murmur. Then a voice rang out, fierce and cutting, "Where's my niece?" Aunt Rita Carter, her father's sister, stormed down the hallway, her high heels clicking like gunfire on the linoleum floor. She burst into the interrogation room, ignoring the startled officer who tried to stop her, and immediately wrapped Eva in her arms. "Eva, baby, are you hurt?" she asked, her voice breaking. Eva shook her head, unable to form words. The physical wounds were absent, but the emotional ones bled raw and unseen. Rita pulled back, taking in the blood-stained hoodie, the hollow eyes, the trembling hands, and rage ignited in her chest like wildfire. "What the hell is wrong with you people?" Rita roared at the officer lingering awkwardly in the doorway. "She's a child. Where is your captain? Where are your lawyers? You have no right to detain her without family present." The officer stammered incoherently, then pointed down the hall. Rita didn't wait for permission. She grabbed Eva's hand and marched her out, protective fury blazing in every step. Other officers shrank back as they passed, some averting their eyes in shame, others stubborn in their indifference. Captain Helena Mora met them in her office, wearing an expression that tried, and failed, to blend concern with bureaucratic caution. "We're investigating the incident," Mora said stiffly. "Internal affairs." "She's 13, Rita snapped, cutting her off. "She needs to go home. Now." Mora exhaled, a tight, exasperated breath. "You're right. We'll release her into your custody pending the investigation." The papers were hastily signed. No apology was given. Outside the station, Kim Delgado waited on the steps, her phone still clutched in her wrinkled hand. She had uploaded the video online before she even left the scene. Now it was starting to spread. She knelt in front of Eva, tears shining in her eyes. "I saw everything, sweetheart," Kim said softly. "The world's gonna see it too. I promise you." Eva nodded numbly, though her spirit felt crushed beyond recognition. She allowed herself to be bundled into Rita's car, the familiar smell of her aunt's perfume triggering a fresh wave of silent sobs. At home, Eva scrubbed herself raw in the shower, but no amount of soap could erase the feel of Rex's blood against her skin. She slipped into clean pajamas and descended the stairs in a daze, where Rita was making tea she knew neither of them would drink. "Your dad's flying back," Rita said quietly, placing a trembling hand on Eva's shoulder. "He'll be here tomorrow." Those words, meant to comfort, instead filled Eva with a hollow ache. Her father, the strongest man she knew, would come home to find their world shattered. That night was a sleepless wasteland. Every creak of the house twisted Eva's gut into knots. Every time she closed her eyes she saw Rex falling, heard the gunshot echoing over and over like cruel laughter. Meanwhile, Rita was a woman possessed. She worked the phones relentlessly, calling lawyers, contacting media outlets, coordinating with Kim. She refused to let this be buried under procedural jargon and official lies. "They claimed the dog lunged," Rita muttered bitterly at 2 a.m., flipping through preliminary reports on her laptop. "But Kim's video shows otherwise. They're lying. Plain and simple." Eva curled up on the couch, exhausted but wired, listening to her aunt's voice drift into the darkness. She clutched a throw pillow like a lifeline, the scent of home wrapping around her like a frail shield. When morning finally crept over the horizon, painting the sky with a sorrowful blush of pink, Eva was still awake. Her heart ached, not just from grief, but from the weight of something heavier. A dawning awareness that the world she lived in wasn't fair, wasn't safe. The doorbell rang, jarring them both. Rita rushed to answer, heart hammering. Standing on the doorstep was Dr. Letitia Gold, Eva's therapist, a tall, graceful woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air about her. "Where is she?" Dr. Gold asked immediately, her voice full of urgent compassion. Inside, Eva sat listlessly at the dining table, staring into a cup of untouched tea. Dr. Gold approached her carefully, like one might approach a wounded animal. "I'm so sorry about Rex," she said, her voice breaking the dam inside Eva. Tears spilled down the girl's cheeks as she choked out a broken whisper. "Why?" Dr. Gold sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "There's no good reason, Eva. Some people act out of fear. Some out of ignorance. Some out of hate. It's wrong. But it's not your fault." Eva trembled. "He died protecting me," she whispered. Dr. Gold nodded. "And that loyalty, that love, nothing can erase that." In the corner of the room, Rita wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. She wanted to scream, to rage against the universe, but instead she stayed silent, knowing that right now Eva needed quiet strength. The day dragged on in a blur of hushed conversations and muted television reports. Word was spreading. The video Kim posted had been shared thousands of times overnight. Local news outlets were picking it up. Social media boiled with anger, grief, and calls for justice. But nothing could bring Rex back. Late that afternoon, Eva's phone buzzed with a message that made her heart jolt. "Dad, landing at LAX at 4 p.m. Hang tight, sweet pea. I love you." Eva pressed the phone to her chest, eyes closing against a new swell of tears. Her dad was coming. But even he couldn't undo the bullet that shattered her heart. Across town at the Hawthorne Falls Police Department, Captain Mora stared grimly at the brewing storm outside her window. She knew things were about to explode. And for once, she wasn't sure if her department would survive it. The clock on the wall ticked loud and slow as Eva paced the living room, wringing her hands in nervous anticipation. Every few seconds she would glance out the window, as if expecting her father's truck to come screeching into the driveway any moment. Aunt Rita sat stiffly on the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, half listening to the news anchor reporting on the officer-involved shooting that had left a service animal fatally wounded. The language infuriated Rita. Fatally wounded, as if Rex were some collateral damage in a war zone instead of an innocent soul murdered in broad daylight. Eva didn't hear the broadcast. Her mind was a storm, her heart a drumbeat of fear and hope colliding. When the sound of tires crunching the gravel driveway finally came, she bolted for the door, throwing it open before the car even stopped. Her father stepped out, travel-worn but unmistakably powerful in his presence. Commander Stephen Carter, once Delta Force, always a protector, looked up just in time to catch Eva as she flung herself into his arms. "Daddy," she sobbed, clutching him desperately. "I'm here, sweet pea," he murmured, voice thick. "I'm here. I've got you." He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her trembling shoulders. Over her head, his eyes found Rita's, who stood framed in the doorway, her own expression crumbling under the weight of relief and helpless rage. Inside, Eva poured out the story between hiccuped sobs. The walk, the confrontation, the gunshot, Rex's final moments. Stephen listened without interruption, though every word gouged deeper into his soul. His knuckles whitened, fists clenching and unclenching against his thighs. When she finished, silence fell, heavy and suffocating. "I'll fix this," Stephen said, his voice low and dangerous. "I swear it, Eva. They won't get away with it." Rita approached, placing a folder of documents and a USB drive on the coffee table. Kim Delgado's footage. Witness statements starting to come in. "We're gathering everything." Stephen nodded grimly. "Good. We're not going through this quietly." He rose and retreated to his small study off the living room. Rita followed, closing the door behind them. Eva curled up on the couch, arms wrapped around her knees, listening to the low murmur of voices through the thin walls. Inside the study, Stephen leaned over his laptop, scanning through the raw footage Kim had provided. His trained eye picked apart every second. Rex standing calmly, Myers' hand jerking toward his weapon, the muzzle flash, Eva's heart-wrenching scream. He replayed it 3 times, each loop forging his anger into something harder, colder. "Premeditated aggression," he muttered. Rita paced behind him. "The department's closing ranks. They're already spinning the narrative." Stephen's jaw tensed. They picked the wrong family to steamroll. That night, while Eva fitfully slept on the couch, too afraid to be alone upstairs, Stephen called in every favor he had. Former teammates, intelligence officers, security consultants. Quiet inquiries, careful moves. By dawn, he had a preliminary dossier on officers Myers and Lacefield. What he found disgusted him. Myers had been flagged multiple times for excessive force complaints, always cleared internally. Several families, particularly minorities, had accused him of aggressive policing tactics, intimidation, even violence against pets. Lacefield's record was cleaner on paper, but whispers of loyalty to Myers and involvement in shady neighborhood watch initiatives painted a clear enough picture. Stephen sat back, staring at the compiled file. It wasn't just about Rex anymore. These men were dangerous predators hiding behind badges. He printed copies, encrypted digital backups, and reached out to a civil rights attorney in Los Angeles specializing in police misconduct. The wheels were grinding into motion. But by mid-morning, the reality of how much they were up against became sickeningly clear. The local news station aired a heavily edited version of the incident. They showed blurry stills of Rex from another day, barking playfully at a park, framing him as aggressive-looking. They quoted anonymous sources, suggesting Eva had lost control of her dog and escalated the situation. The officers were described as acting in accordance with department training. Eva watched from the couch, horror and betrayal splashed across her face. "They're lying," she whispered, voice breaking. Stephen turned the TV off with a vicious jab at the remote. "Of course they are. They know public opinion will decide how this goes." Rita stepped in, hands trembling with rage. "They're painting her as a threat. A 13-year-old girl." Stephen nodded slowly. "And they're doing it because they're scared. They know what's coming." He stood, every inch the soldier he had once been, and locked eyes with Rita. "We push harder. We don't stop." That afternoon, neighbors began trickling by, some with casseroles, others with words of support. Kim Delgado came too, bearing printed copies of the raw video in case the online version was scrubbed. "The town's splitting," she said quietly, glancing toward Eva where she sat staring blankly out the window. "Some people support you. Others, not so much. They're scared of what it means to admit the truth." Stephen grunted. "Truth doesn't need permission." Later that evening, the first threat arrived. A single piece of paper slipped under the front door. "Stay quiet or next time it won't just be your dog." Stephen read it, crumpled it slowly in one fist, and threw it into the fire pit in the backyard. Eva watched from the kitchen window, her hands pressed to the glass. She understood now. This wasn't just about Rex anymore. It was about standing up to everything he had protected her from, and everything trying to tear her down. The next morning came heavy with gray skies and the low rumble of distant thunder. Hawthorne Falls, usually so pristine and picture-perfect, felt darker, unsettled, as if the town itself sensed the gathering storm. Eva stayed curled on the couch under a blanket, her eyes bloodshot, still clinging to the photo of Rex she kept tucked into the folds of her sweatshirt. She hadn't spoken much since the threat note appeared. A piece of her seemed to have gone silent, not broken, not shattered, but muted, as if waiting. Stephen, meanwhile, moved through the house like a man preparing for siege. He double-checked the locks, tested the alarm system, repositioned the cameras he'd hastily installed around the property. His military mind knew better than to assume the enemy would play fair. Rita stayed on the phone constantly, working with the attorney Stephen had contacted, reaching out to advocacy groups, laying groundwork for what was clearly shaping into a legal and public relations battle. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. By midday, the world outside exploded. Kim Delgado's video went viral after a major news outlet picked it up. Within hours, Hawthorne Falls was trending nationally. #JusticeForRex flooded social media, accompanied by outrage and heartbreak. Influencers, celebrities, even a few prominent veterans reposted the footage with searing commentary about police brutality, misuse of force, and the vulnerability of service animals. For the first time, Stephen allowed himself a thin smile. The system might resist change, but public opinion was a force no one could fully control. He was reviewing the newest batch of online comments when a heavy knock sounded at the door. Stephen tensed instinctively, motioning Eva to stay back as he approached. Through the peephole, he saw Captain Mora standing stiff-backed in full uniform, flanked by two officers he didn't recognize. He opened the door cautiously but kept the security chain latched. "We're not here to cause trouble," Mora said, holding up both hands in a placating gesture. "We're here to formally inform you that Officers Myers and Lacefield have been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation." Stephen narrowed his eyes. "That's nice," he said flatly. "But they already tried to intimidate my daughter once. Forgive me if I don't feel safer." Mora's face tightened. "I know you have no reason to trust me. But this time we're doing it by the book. Internal Affairs is handling it. And the district attorney's office has taken an interest." That last part piqued Stephen's attention. "You brought a warrant?" he asked. Mora shook her head. "No. I'm not here to search your home or question your daughter. I came to warn you, unofficially, that we intercepted chatter. Myers and Lacefield might try something off the grid. We're trying to find them." Stephen stared at her for a long, cold beat. Then, slowly, he closed the door again without another word. "Lock everything," he told Rita, his voice low but fierce. "Full lockdown." Aunt Rita obeyed immediately, securing the bolts as Stephen turned back to Eva. "They're scared," he told her, crouching so they were eye to eye. "Because they know they're losing. That's why they're dangerous. But we are not alone. We are smarter. Stronger." Eva swallowed, nodding shakily. Stephen brushed her hair back from her forehead. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "No matter how scared you feel, you are braver than they ever will be." Outside, the thunder cracked louder and a cold drizzle began to fall, slicking the streets and darkening the sidewalks. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. The hours crawled by. Stephen spent them meticulously planning, If Myers and Lacefield came for them, he wouldn't just be reacting. He would be ready. He set up a silent alarm that would notify Jordan Neal, the young officer still quietly feeding him information, if triggered. He placed his legally owned M9 pistol on the kitchen counter, within reach but out of Eva's sight. That night, Eva slept fitfully on the couch again. Stephen stayed awake, a silent sentinel in the living room, while Rita dozed with a baseball bat propped beside her chair. At 2:37 a.m. Stephen's phone buzzed. A text from Jordan Neal. Be advised. Myers and Lacefield are off the grid. Unofficial sources say they're armed. Stay alert. Stephen's stomach dropped into a cold pit. He clicked off the lamp and sat in darkness, straining to hear any sound beyond the whisper of rain against the windows. Hours passed. Nothing. Until 5:14 a.m., when the first real sign came. A car engine. Slow. Creeping up the street. Stephen rose silently, peering through the blinds. A black sedan rolled to a stop 2 houses down. The windows were tinted. No lights. No movement. Stephen's heart pounded in his ears. Was it them? Or someone else entirely? He didn't wait to find out. He moved back, gathered Rita and Eva into the kitchen. Quiet, he ordered. Eva's eyes were wide, terrified, but she obeyed without question. Stephen crouched by the window watching. Waiting. The minutes dragged. Then finally the sedan pulled away, disappearing into the gray dawn. False alarm? Or reconnaissance? Stephen didn't know. But he knew this, the battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The sun barely peeked over the rooftops when Stephen made the decision. They couldn't just sit and wait anymore. Sitting was for victims. He was a soldier. He knew better. He brewed a strong pot of black coffee, poured a mug for Rita, and set another steaming cup next to Eva, who sat sleepily at the kitchen table, her hoodie wrapped tightly around her small frame. Dad? She asked, voice hoarse. What's going to happen? Stephen crouched beside her, resting a steadying hand on her knee. We're going to make sure no one ever hurts you again. I promise. Aunt Rita, bleary-eyed but fierce, sipped her coffee and nodded. We're not alone anymore. A lot of people are standing with us. It was true. Overnight, the number of supporters had exploded. Messages from strangers poured into Rita's inbox. Veterans, parents of kids with service dogs, survivors of police intimidation, offering resources, legal advice, protection. The Carter family wasn't an isolated target anymore. They were the lightning rod for a growing storm. Stephen spent the morning gathering every shred of evidence they had. The original footage from Kim Delgado, the deleted complaints Jordan Neal had risked his career to recover, statements from neighbors, Eva's own eyewitness account. He packaged it neatly into an encrypted drive and uploaded multiple backups to secure cloud servers. Then, with Rita at his side, he made a direct call to a national investigative journalist who had been circling the story for days. You want it? Stephen said without preamble. We want it, the journalist replied immediately. Everything you have. Stephen agreed to a private meeting at a neutral location the next day. If the local authorities wouldn't act, he would take the battle public, and loud. But just as momentum surged, another chilling reminder arrived. At 2:12 p.m., a rock smashed through the front window. Eva screamed, ducking instinctively behind the kitchen island. Stephen was there in 2 strides, shielding her with his body. Rita rushed forward, peeking through the shattered glass. No one in sight. Whoever did it had fled. But the rock spoke loudly enough. Stay scared. Stay quiet. Stephen's hands shook, not from fear but from fury barely held in check. He gathered Eva and Rita into the car within minutes, throwing a go-bag into the trunk. Enough was enough. He drove them to a safe house arranged through a Veterans Network contact, an old, fortified ranch house on the outskirts of town. Heavy locks. Hidden cameras. Backup generators. It wasn't comfortable, but it was secure. Eva wandered the small living room of the ranch, still hugging her tattered photo of Rex. Stephen crouched beside her. I know it's scary, he said quietly. But this is temporary. And we're going to end this. She nodded, small and solemn. That night, Stephen couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch with his M9 resting on his thigh, staring into the starless sky. Every noise, an owl's hoot, a distant car engine, made him tense. He wasn't used to fighting wars without clear enemies. Here, the enemies wore friendly uniforms, shook hands with city councilmen, attended the same Sunday barbecues. The thought made his blood boil. Around midnight his phone buzzed. It was Jordan Neal. I overheard Myers and Lacefield talking before they disappeared. They think they're untouchable. Planning to make an example. You need to be careful, sir. Very careful. Stephen texted back. Thank you. Stay safe too. He pocketed the phone and stared into the dark again. They would come. Sooner or later. And when they did, he would be ready. Morning came colder than expected, a thin frost dusting the grass outside. Stephen loaded Eva and Rita into the car early, heading toward the journalist meeting at a discreet diner on the edge of the next county. As they pulled into the lot, Stephen scanned the surroundings with a soldier's vigilance. No black sedans. No suspicious figures. Good. Inside, the journalist, a wiry woman named Claudia Ruiz, sat in a corner booth, her laptop open, recorder ready. Stephen slid into the seat across from her, Rita beside him, Eva tucked into the booth nearest the window, silently tracing the condensation on the glass. Claudia didn't waste time. We can run this story nationally, she said. Multiple outlets are interested. But once this goes live, it won't just be your local PD you're fighting. It'll be every system that protects men like Myers. Stephen nodded grimly. I know. Rita leaned forward. We're ready? Stephen handed over the drive. Claudia plugged it into her laptop, scrolling through the files, her eyes widening. This is explosive, she murmured. Evidence tampering. Patterns of abuse. The deleted complaints alone could trigger a federal inquiry. Stephen didn't blink. Then let's trigger one. Claudia nodded, her fingers already flying over the keyboard. Give me 24 hours. As they left the diner, the air felt different. Sharper. Like a fuse had been lit. Stephen pulled Eva close as they crossed the parking lot. No matter what happens next, he whispered, you are never alone. She squeezed his hand. For the first time in days, a flicker of the old Eva, the fearless girl who had once charged through sprinklers with Rex barking at her heels, glimmered back to life. The story hit the airwaves the next morning like a thunderclap. Across television screens, news feeds, and social media platforms, Eva's tear-streaked face and Rex's last loyal stand flashed on every channel. National outlets ran headlines that screamed injustice. Service dog shot by police. Family demands accountability. Videos of Rex's calm demeanor, frozen forever in Kim Delgado's footage, stood in stark contrast to the police department's claim of imminent threat. And the people responded. Protests bloomed like wildfires across Hawthorne Falls. Students, parents, veterans, dog lovers, civil rights groups, all demanding justice for Eva and Rex. Crowds held signs, Justice for Rex, Protect our children, not your power, and Service dogs save lives, not threats. Standing at the window of the ranch house safe spot, Eva watched news helicopters buzz overhead. She clutched Stephen's hand so tightly that his knuckles whitened, but he didn't flinch. You started something bigger than us, Stephen murmured, voice full of both pride and sorrow. Eva shook her head. I just want Rex back. Stephen kneeled to face her. I know, sweetheart. But because of Rex, because of you, other kids will be safer. That matters. It matters more than they ever wanted it to. Meanwhile, the backlash inside the Hawthorne Falls Police Department turned volcanic. Internal emails leaked, some from whistleblowers, others from anonymous sources, revealing that complaints against Myers and Lacefield had been intentionally buried for years. Evidence of corruption within the department's internal affairs division surfaced. Officers once afraid to speak up now came forward, their testimonies damning. And under the crushing weight of public outrage, the mayor called for a full federal investigation. Stephen, standing beside Rita in their temporary safe house, watched the news conference where Captain Mora addressed the media. She looked visibly shaken, her words clipped. We failed, she admitted publicly. And we are committed to rooting out every trace of that failure. When a reporter asked if criminal charges would be filed against Myers and Lacefield, Mora hesitated only a moment before replying, yes. The district attorney's office is preparing formal charges. Eva watched all of this unfold with wide eyes, clutching Rex's photo close to her heart. Her fingers traced his image again and again, a silent tether to the loyalty and love that still lived within her, no matter how broken the world seemed. But even as victory drew nearer, danger still loomed. Later that evening, Jordan Neal called Stephen on a burner phone. They're desperate, Jordan said, his voice low. I heard Lacefield boasting about fixing everything before he got fired. They're not just going to roll over. Be careful. Stephen thanked him and hung up, his mind already shifting into battle readiness. He had learned long ago that cornered men, especially those fueled by hate and wounded pride, were the most dangerous of all. He spent the evening preparing the ranch house for any possibility. Tripwire alarms across the backyard. motion sensors by the doors, backup phones charged and hidden, a tactical bag packed with essentials if evacuation became necessary. "You're over-preparing," Rita said, though her voice held no real criticism, only worry. Stephen didn't look up. "You over-prepare when you've seen how fast the world can burn down around you." Meanwhile, Eva sat cross-legged on the floor, organizing a small collection of Rex's old toys and collar into a memory box Aunt Rita had bought her. She worked silently, her face determined, hands steady despite the sorrow etched into every movement. Stephen knelt beside her, watching in silence for a moment before asking, "May I help?" Eva nodded, and together they folded Rex's worn NASA-patterned dog blanket, tucking it carefully into the box. When they finished, Eva closed the lid and whispered, "For when we're safe again." Stephen's throat tightened. "We will be, sweet pea. I promise." But even as he spoke the words, he felt it, that shift in the air that soldiers knew instinctively. The storm was coming. And it was closer than any of them realized. The first strike came at 3:17 a.m. A sharp pop from the back of the house. A firecracker or something meant to sound like one. Stephen woke instantly, adrenaline dumping into his veins. He rolled off the couch and reached for the pistol on the nightstand, sweeping the room with laser-focused precision. Another pop. Aunt Rita stumbled into the hallway, disoriented. What's happening?" "Stay with Eva," Stephen barked. He crept to the back door, peering through the reinforced window. Movement. Two figures, hooded, moving fast, trying to cut the motion sensors along the fence line. Stephen's mind raced. No lights. No sirens. They were trying to scare them. Intimidate them into fleeing, or worse. He pressed the silent panic button on his phone, alerting Jordan Neal and the local veteran network. Then he waited. Eva clung to Rita inside the makeshift safe room, tears streaming down her face, but she stayed silent, remembering her father's training. Be small, be quiet, be ready. Outside, the figures slashed at the security cameras, plunging the back half of the yard into shadow. Stephen exhaled slowly, centering himself. He wasn't just defending a house. He was defending his daughter's life. As the first figure tried to pry open the back door, Stephen moved like a shadow himself, slamming his boot into the intruder's shoulder through the door, sending him sprawling backward into the mud. The second figure rushed forward, but headlights suddenly slashed through the darkness as two veteran buddies screeched into the driveway, rifles drawn, shouts ringing through the night. "Get on the ground. Hands where we can see them." The would-be attackers hesitated, then fled into the woods behind the ranch house, disappearing into the dense blackness. Stephen didn't pursue. He stood over the threshold, heart hammering, pistol raised, guarding his family as the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon. Inside, Eva collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "You're safe," he whispered fiercely, holding her tighter than he ever had before. "You're safe." And now they had everything they needed. The attackers had been caught on the driveway security cams. Faces partially obscured, yes, but enough detail remained. Enough to expose them. By the time police arrived, summoned not by Stephen but by his veteran network contacts, the evidence was already being sent to the district attorney's office, the news outlets and the civil rights attorneys who were waiting ready to strike. Myers and Lacefield hadn't just crossed a line. They had destroyed any chance of protecting themselves. And they had proven, once and for all, that Eva and Rex hadn't been victims of a misunderstanding. They had been targeted. By noon that same day, the small, fortified ranch house was swarmed, not by enemies but by allies. Sheriff's deputies from a neighboring county, now under federal direction, arrived with arrest warrants in hand. Officers loyal to the old regime at Hawthorne Falls were temporarily sidelined as external investigators took over the scene. The footage Stephen had captured, the shadowy figures attempting to break in, was enough to tip the balance irrevocably. Arrest warrants were issued for Bradley Myers and Conrad Lacefield, not just for the shooting of Rex, but now for attempted home invasion, intimidation of a minor and obstruction of justice. And this time they couldn't hide behind polished badges or departmental immunity. Stephen stood on the porch of the safe house, arms crossed, Eva by his side as news vans parked along the distant country road. The media frenzy had reached a fever pitch, but Stephen kept Eva shielded from it, ushering her back inside once the officials confirmed the immediate danger had passed. Inside, Rita fielded calls from attorneys, journalists, even local politicians scrambling to align themselves on the right side of the story now that public opinion had shifted so drastically. Support for the Carters was no longer just a local movement. It was national. A few days later, Stephen and Eva found themselves back in Hawthorne Falls for the official arraignment hearing. The courthouse buzzed with tension. Protesters gathered outside, signs lifted high, chanting for justice. Reporters clogged the steps, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward anyone remotely connected to the case. Eva clung to Stephen's arm as they made their way through the throng. She wore Rex's old NASA service patch pinned to her hoodie, small but defiant. Inside the courtroom, Myers and Lacefield sat at the defense table, looking like shadows of the men who had once swaggered through their patrols. Their lawyers argued for leniency, spinning desperate tales of confusion and misjudgment, but the evidence was overwhelming. Stephen sat stone-faced, Eva's small hand in his, as Kim Delgado testified with calm, unflinching precision. Jordan Neal provided critical insight into the culture of corruption within the department. Other families came forward too, sharing their experiences of intimidation, harassment, and cover-ups. Each testimony was another nail in the coffin. Finally, the judge addressed Myers and Lacefield directly. "You betrayed the public trust," the judge said, voice cold and even. "You victimized the very citizens you swore to protect. You allowed your prejudice and fear to guide your actions, with tragic consequences." The courtroom held its breath as sentencing was passed. Multiple felony convictions. Substantial prison time. Lifetime bans from ever serving in law enforcement again. As bailiffs led them away in shackles, Stephen felt no triumph. Only grim satisfaction. They hadn't won in the traditional sense. Rex was still gone. Eva's innocence was still scarred. But they had ensured the monsters would never claim another victim. Outside the courthouse, Captain Mora waited. She approached carefully, her badge gleaming under the late afternoon sun. "Mr. Carter, Eva," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "I can't erase what happened. But I will spend the rest of my career making sure it never happens again. Not here, not anywhere I can reach." Stephen met her gaze and, after a long moment, offered a nod. "Then do it. No grand speeches. No handshakes for the cameras. Just a simple agreement, soldier to soldier, protector to protector." Weeks passed. The town began to heal, slowly, cautiously. A new police chief was appointed, one who promised transparency and accountability. Public forums were held where citizens, including Eva, spoke openly about trust, fear, and the responsibilities of those in power. Eva found her voice again. Tentatively at first, then with growing strength. At a candlelight vigil for Rex, held at the town's small park, she stood before hundreds, holding the microphone in trembling hands. "My dog Rex was my best friend," she said, her voice cracking but strong. "He protected me when I was scared. He loved me when I thought the world was falling apart. He didn't deserve what happened. No one deserves to lose someone they love because of fear and hate." She looked out at the sea of candles flickering in the twilight. "We have to be better than this. For all the kids like me. For all the dogs like Rex." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Stephen, standing off to the side, felt a lump rise in his throat. Not from grief but from overwhelming pride. His daughter, his brave, beautiful daughter, had turned tragedy into something powerful. Later that month, Stephen kept his promise. On a bright Saturday morning, he and Eva visited the local animal rescue center. Rows of hopeful eyes met them, tails wagging, tongues lolling. In the last kennel they found her. A young German shepherd mix with cream-colored fur and shy, intelligent eyes. Not a replacement for Rex, never a replacement, but a new companion for a heart that had been cracked open and somehow healed stronger. They named her Maple. At home, Maple explored the yard, sniffing the plaque Stephen and Eva had placed beneath the old hawthorn bushes. In loving memory of Rex, guardian, friend, hero. Eva sat cross-legged on the grass, Maple's head in her lap, the sun warm on her face. Stephen watched from the porch, arms crossed loosely, a small smile pulling at his mouth. They had walked through hell. They had faced down corruption, fear, and grief. And they had survived. Not untouched. Not unscarred. But unbroken. In a world where fear and injustice often strike without warning, it takes incredible courage to stand tall, to speak out, and to refuse to be silenced. Eva Carter's story reminds us that even in our darkest hours, hope and resilience shine brightest. It's not the strength of our fists that defines us, but the strength of our hearts. If you believe in justice, in truth, and in the quiet heroes who refuse to give up, don't forget to subscribe to True Echo, leave a comment about what this story meant to you, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that one voice, one stand can change everything.